Okay, hello everyone, welcome to this panel. So this panel is going to be focused on STEM education and widening access to space with PocketQubes. So you've met most of the folks here today, but just to reintroduce you all, this is Alexander from the European Space Agency, Fly Your Thesis program. You've got Kevin Simmons, who's done a lot of work in the US with middle schools and high schools, promoting space education there. You've got Rom, the captain founder of ROMSPACE, who delivered Romania's first PocketQubes to space at high school age. You've got Konstantinos, who works with the University of Luxembourg, who's also launching Luxembourg's first PocketQube as well. So, yeah, welcome, and myself. So, yeah, just to sort of kick off, like, what do you think is like the biggest hurdles for people actually getting into space education? I'm not sure who wants to take the first question. Like, yeah, so the first 3 points really that's kind of been highlighted here is obviously like diversity and people being able to see themselves within, like find their own role models just to say, okay, there is a path forward to do that. Obviously, like, access to these sort of opportunities being highlighted through like what you've mentioned with like funding and things like this. And yeah, so is there any ways that you're thinking, you know, how do we broaden the concept of, you know, that this sort of thing is doable? Because back when I started like at ALBA 2019, there wasn't like a lot of people didn't take PocketQube seriously, and I imagine CubeSats before that. And, you know, even back at my high school days, you know, I never thought I'd be involved in space. It's always like, okay, it's a bit Star Trek, it's a bit sci-fi, but, you know, now I see people on the regular kind of saying, yeah, cool, we've got our own space program, and even people as young as 13 and yourself building it. So I think case studies and, you know, showing people going ahead and doing this is maybe like one thing. So yeah, like Philip, have you seen like a lot more interest like in your country with like PocketQubes, satellite space education following your launch?
Yeah, so there were definitely a lot of high school students contacting us and asking us how we managed to do this and what was our motivation and a lot of other aspects. There's also a lot of other teams in our country that are trying to develop their first prototypes. For example, the Two Space team, and there's also another association, I think it's ROSPIN, maybe you've heard of them. So yeah, I definitely see a growth in terms of satellites and people wanting to have access to space.
So yeah, you've got a point?
Yeah. It's an interesting point actually, because Romania is an interesting case study. So there was a Romanian satellite in 2012, and at the same time there was a similar kind of momentum behind it, but then the satellite failed and it dropped. All momentum was lost, and really I didn't hear anything about the Romanian space effort again until quite recently. So I think there's something to be said about maintaining the momentum as well. It's not good enough just to do one flagship project and hope that's going to drag the whole country forward with it. It has to be a series of events and projects and things, and maintained over some time. So Romania is really an interesting case in this.
Yes. This is what we're trying to do. So we're planning to have a generation of younger high school students that will continue the work we've done with missions in the future, ROM 5, ROM 6, all the way to ROM 20, I don't know. So yeah, we're trying to inspire people that will continue what we did. So the satellite that you talked about that was launched with 𝗖cie, I think, in 2012 was Romania's first satellite, and we're not getting credit for having the first Romanian satellite, but unfortunately, it was not functional. So yeah, this was why I think the interest for satellites dropped in those years.
Yeah, I think hopefully the tolerance to failure is a little higher now, because the whole thing, it failed, and then whoa, we don't talk about it anymore. Really missed the whole point.
I'd like to add on to what you said about momentum. From my perspective, when I have students that I might have 3 years, maybe 7 if I get them early in middle school through high school, I think a missed opportunity is finding educators that are willing to learn this content, because the educators could be there for decades. And just like this great ROMSPACE team, right? If there was a faculty member at that school that was the champion, like an internal champion for that project. Then it would be reloading with students every year versus, maybe having to rebuild or start all over once the momentum waned off. So the key is find the educators that are willing to embrace this and give them the skills that they need, which in the U.S., a lot of teachers are confined from a curriculum standpoint. But this is a $1 trillion sector. We either get on now or we get left behind. So the education industry, the education effort in each of our countries needs to adapt to these new opportunities.
Not to plug the European program, but we do have teacher training workshops for space, and we have educational space European Space Educational Resource Offices in every country, where the teachers of those countries can find out about how to include space within their curriculum. So not fighting the system against the system, but how to include it in there for high schools and for primary schools.
Triple the budget.
We send a letter to my boss.
Yeah, I'd like to touch a little bit more on this awareness aspect that you talked about, because I'm originally from Greece, and in my country 3 or 4 years ago there were actually a lot of companies doing space downstream, doing space upstream. We actually had launched 2 satellites, 2 CubeSats made entirely in Greece, but nobody knew about them. And nobody knew that the country had any kind of space presence. And when a national space agency was created to kind of manage all those activities and encourage people to collaborate on them, it was really publicly ridiculed. I think it closed, then it was reinstantiated. So there was a very weird thing going on, and still people did not know that the country had space activity. And whenever we made public events and we made any kind of outreach activities, people were really excited to see that the country, that the university, that an institution was actually making those things. And in the latest years, we've had a program supported by Flyer Satellite. This program became very popular. We are seeing an increased number of students applying to that. After this program, maybe it was an inspiration. We got even more and more projects from the space agency. We got funding for, I think, 13 CubeSat missions, and this happened slowly after this one, let's say this one spark. And because people were interested about it, because companies were interested about it, because universities were interested about it, we started gaining this sort of momentum. We still don't have, in the last, I think, 5 years or 4 years, we don't have a launched mission. So we don't have something that we know failed or didn't fail to provoke the next step. But we are already seeing the next steps. And even in Luxembourg, we also have a lot of public events and a lot of outreach events, and always it's very nice to see people and families interested in those aspects. And we made an event this year in around spring just to promote space activities in specific, and we saw thousands of people coming to this small country, this small city, Luxembourg, with families, children ready to participate in workshops, see talks, even the more boring stuff. They were very popular from people who were excited to see that, okay, actually I can go to space. Actually I can participate in this kind of thing. I don't need to be someone super expert who is working on something for 40 years, but everyone realized that space is here for us and right now.
Yeah, so another thing I've seen from the conversation is definitely momentum is the very important part, as well as awareness. So the thing I've seen, just going on the momentum part, very similar to what happened in Romania with yourself, people seeing that it is an option, something that you can do, really does spark them. Myself, before I started working at Alba, I was training to be a psychologist as opposed to ever dreaming of anything to do with space. But little did I know, I always sat in Glasgow, which happens to be the biggest is the capital for European satellite builders, and I would never have known that until I turned up on Alba's door. But so how do we kind of get the info out there? How do we promote this sort of opportunities better?
I like competitions. I think competitions for students, opportunities for teachers, students, art, engineering, coding. In the U.S., FIRST Robotics, this robotics teams compete against each other. It's wildly popular. I don't know why my hope would be that we could turn small sats into that national level type of team competition, almost like a sports team where, there's a lot of enthusiasm and students can look forward to competing against students from other schools. I prefer the STEM stuff, but I have a lot of students that do space art. Anything that gets a child thinking in the direction of aerospace is a good thing. And frankly, competitions aren't too expensive if all you're doing is really sort of offering prizes to the winners of the competition. My conference at KSC, we had 5,600 art entries, and it really only cost us about $500 for all the prizes. But we got 5,600 students entering an art contest.
So first, an answer to that. I have to say in Europe, at least with the Space Agency, we haven't traditionally done competitions as much. We used to shy away from them because we talked about collaboration more than competition, but there is European competitions, the European Rover Competition, European Rocketry Challenge, etc. And maybe it's something that will happen more. But to go back to the question as well, I think it's a little bit that the private sector also has to come with us on this educational journey. I think a lot of companies like to do education, like to do outreach, but maybe there has to be more collaboration between companies to do this. And I see it a lot in new space, but not so much in old space. Airbus and OHB don't necessarily go into schools, but they might sponsor a big conference or something like this. Maybe smaller companies are better off going into schools. And maybe that's something that needs to happen also through our programs. So part of the Space for Education 2030 at 𝗖cie is talking about not just building the satellite, but okay, what is the business after that? Like, what is the downstream application? And then people start to say, okay, it's not just the endeavors of science and big space agencies. Actually, there's companies in my country, in my town even, that might be doing this thing. And I think, okay, that comes back to the role models part. Who, like me, is doing this? Who from Glasgow is building satellites? If I'm going to live in Glasgow, what can I do? Can I build satellites, or am I going to be psychologist? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's seeing what's accessible within your sphere, and that needs the private sector near you to be able to advertise what they're doing.
Yeah, I definitely see what the kind of both of you are saying about competitions and getting the private sector on board as well. Because again, talking about Romania, just because we've been there recently and, Philip's done some great work there. The role model, Philip, went out and did his thing, and we saw at Cube to Space that the 2Space team held. When I went there the first year, a lot of the satellites it was very much an introduction for a lot of the high schools to say, okay, cool, this is something we can do. But by the time it came around the second year, these things were almost close to being like a flight model. They were looking really good. And that was just because they had the practice and the time to go ahead with it. And what you're saying about private sector is what we've seen, even with the guys who do say, okay, we're going to build this first thing, we're going to learn about it. The passion doesn't die there. A lot of these guys go ahead and do startups and go down the road of entrepreneurship, and, some guys start at CANSAT level, but maybe go into doing IoT and things like that. So do you think that sort of new space philosophy kind of has a role in bringing on the next generation of businesses, entrepreneurs, and ways to kind of solve things on Earth?
I'd like to hear from the younger guys what you think about new space and old space with regards to education. Does it mean anything to you?
So, you mean new space, the modern era of space? So being able to send satellites as a university project, of course, the technological advancements made possible such projects. So I think that nowadays there's a lot more opportunities that you can have to do. Was this the question?
We're perhaps not at the glory days of space at the moment by some metrics. The glory days of the 60s and 70s and the space race and things, this was very inspiring. But arguably, there's a whole other paradigm shift now with new space, and you are new space. You're on the edge of doing all these new activities, and I'm just interested to know how you feel about that, how that affects your access to education and motivation to work in space. It's maybe a complicated question there.
Yeah, I'll buy you some time, let you think about your answer. Well, I was born right about the time, of the first moon landing, and I lived through 30 years of the shuttle. But the new space is exciting. It's a little bit of the Wild West, just like you're trying to standardize the PocketQube. The CubeSat, you have this hype cycle where people are really infatuated with something, new tech on the front end. And then there's always this, I think they call it the trough of disillusionment. But the CubeSats are pretty mature, but the PocketQubes, you're on the front end of this. I think the new space economy provides enormous opportunities for those that are willing to embrace it now. And my last thought about competition and collaboration is, my experience is that companies like to invest in their community. For instance, a company may very well be willing to send a few kids from their geographical area to a conference. That's a great way to try to leverage your companies to do something, right? Maybe they don't want to support a conference in a large way, but if they just send a few students, that can be very impactful as well.
So the new era of space also, it's like it developed a lot more into the companies and the private sector than it did in the 70s, when the golden age of space flight was taking place. For example, first moon landings and a lot of deep space missions. So nowadays, there's actually a lot more opportunities also for high schools and university students because of this private sector development, like really fast development.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the point that you mentioned, because we see a lot of private companies, industry, who are not just supporting their purpose per se, but also supporting everything around it. And it's also companies in my country and in Luxembourg that also have supported this kind of outreach activities. And this is something that I like to see a lot. And I give this out as a call to anyone here who is part of has decision-making authority in any kind of industry, that you can and you should support those kinds of outreach activities, supporting people to go to conferences outside of their countries and spreading the word or receiving word. And CubeSat teams receive funding from private sponsors, PocketQube teams receive funding from private sponsors. This has, I've noticed that within the 5 years that I'm in this industry, this has a very big effect. It might be slow, it might be indirect, but it happens. And I'm just happy to be part of this, let's say, very slow space colonization era that might come in the future. But it's good to see that everyone, every little person and institution is trying to build the blocks to move more and more towards space, and to actually create some value, to not do just scientific experimentation and GPS, which is great, but actually create value, actually create something useful that people are willing to pay for. And this is something I'm very happy to see right now.
So yeah, building on the kind of collaboration idea and the whole, the idea of conferences as well, the thing I like about it is the knowledge sharing is really fundamental to pushing projects to be successful. I mean, again, a lot of my role is very much trying to connect people and trying to solve people's problems in a way, maybe not directly, but for example, when we do these sort of PocketQube conferences, a lot of people are just in an island in their own place, maybe they don't realize, the sort of regulation issues is oh no, this license is something that we can't get, that's our project dead. And maybe, before internet, before actually connecting people, we might go, okay, cool, that's it, done. Very much like how we maybe saw the first satellite from Romania and go, okay, cool, that didn't work out, we won't do it again. And even from ourselves, we connect with TU Delft and different guys and learn what was their struggle. So it's trying not to die on the same hills that other folks have and trying to drive it forward. So trying to drive a lot of that attitude, I guess. So has anyone else got any sort of points to add?
I will just add quickly. So I'm coming from academia, so my point here is that you should try to publish your findings as much as you can and share your experience. Okay, publish this may be a difficult word, but if you have learned something, even if it is very small, you should come up here, you should present it. For me, any lesson learned and any knowledge and experience in a technical point of view or a legal point of view or a management point of view is extremely useful. And we've had hundreds or thousands of teams building satellites, and it's very interesting to see like the organizational structure on how each team does everything different. And many teams do the same thing, many teams do different things, and I'm always curious, like some teams do, let's say a waterfall approach, other teams do this kind of iterative thing, and many people repeat the same mistakes that we are seeing, and many people reinvent the wheel, but many of these problems are solved. And already for CubeSats, for example, we have a bunch of ideas, instructions, people experienced who can tell you how to build a CubeSat and can tell you that, okay, this is steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you need to follow. For other classes of spacecraft, maybe PocketQubes, maybe we don't have this as much, and while there are people experienced, there are people willing to give you advice, like Alba, for example. Still, we don't have as much material, we don't have, let's say, proper guidelines for PocketQube manufacturing, so finding those early steps is a little bit more difficult, but I think it's great if we can move on towards that direction.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of more documentation as a community that's needed better, because even when I'm trying to recommend new things to new teams and I show them like the standard, like a lot of it's like kind of just mechanical based and trying to pull different things. See, Kevin, you got a point.
I'd like to add to what you said. When you want to encourage more people, especially young people, into this pipeline that will become satellite builders or aerospace professionals, having content available at no cost to a rookie, YouTube, blogs, websites, published papers, that's the first place I send my students that know nothing, is what is already known, and that's really contingent on what is available, especially without paying a subscription, right? Because teachers inherently, at least where I'm from, we're sort of poor people, and we don't have deep budgets for subscriptions. So I want to agree with you. Share what you publish. YouTube, even if it's a 5-minute video of a student explaining a problem and how they solved it, that's incredibly valuable to someone that's younger wanting to follow down that path.